Hello and good afternoon or good morning, and welcome to Collaborating for Justice for Older African Americans, webinar number 3, a conversation with culturally specific organization leaders. We're going to take just a moment to let everyone come in since we just started the webinar, so we'll begin in about just a moment. Okay. All right. Well, let's move forward. So once again, I am Victoria Ferguson Young, and welcome to Collaborating for Justice, the conversation with culturally specific organization leaders. This this is a 3-part webinar series. This is our 3rd installment. We have taken the time to go through the resource Collaborating for Justice Guide. And today we will be engaging in a conversation with 3 dynamic leaders from across the country. And also here at NCAL, the National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life, we are sharing sharing this resource to support mainstream organizations and elder justice teams in the work to improve services to older African American adults, and by doing that, by working with culturally specific organizations. So our webinar today will cover a unique conversation, and we'll do a quick recap of our past 2 webinars as we get started before we begin our conversation. So next, we just want to thank our partners at the U.S. Department of Justice Office for Victims of Crime for the funding that made this project possible. And we'd like to note that the content of this webinar is that of NCAL's and does not necessarily reflect the Department of Justice. And once again, I'm Victoria Ferguson Young. I'll be your facilitator today. I'm joined by my colleague, Ann Lotch, who is the Justice System Coordinator at the National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life. I'm the Victim Services Coordinator, and will be assisting with our chat and Q&A today. And we are also joined by 2 American Sign Language, or ASL, interpreters, Jennifer and Janet. So you will see them as well throughout our webinar today. And I just want to tell you a little bit more about NCAL in case you didn't join our first 2 webinars. So we are a project of End Domestic Abuse Wisconsin, a national project, and we provide support to various communities and professionals across the country to improve services for older adults impacted by abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So we do trainings, we provide consultations, we provide training and technical assistance, and we develop resources such as the Collaborating for Justice Guide. So we believe very deeply that all of us deserve to age with safety and with dignity, and that it takes communities working together to do so. So let's move into a recap of webinar 1. So first, we talked about, really just gave an overview of the Collaborating for Justice project. And also we talked about the initial project, which is the Increasing Access Toolkit. So both of these are created to ultimately improve service provision to older African American adults to work towards more just outcomes and healing outcomes for those adults. And our Increasing Access Toolkit talks and addresses providing culturally responsive services, victim services to older African American adults. And Collaborating for Justice, this toolkit focuses on mainstream organizations learning more about equitable engagement with culturally specific ones. We also describe culturally specific organizations, their purpose, their role and importance in advancing elder justice in the African American community. We took the time to discuss the impact of historical and present day racial trauma, and how it is such an important factor that must be considered in service provision. We also address the importance of providing culturally relevant and trauma-informed care. We were able to have some time to have discussion in our last 2 webinars and ask participants also to take the time to learn more about culturally specific organizations in your communities. So we hope that you did take a little bit of time to do that. So in our first webinar, that's what we've covered. In webinar 2, which was on March 26th, we focused on the principles that were developed strictly from our research and our Collaborating for Justice project, where we heard directly from leaders throughout the country who are part of culturally specific organizations. And so we were able to talk about and emphasize the importance of this equitable collaboration. We discussed roadblocks that culturally specific organizations face when they're engaging with multidisciplinary and elder justice collaborations or with mainstream organizations. And we also did a deep dive into the guiding principles of equitable collaboration and partnership. So I do want to take a moment to check in about some homework that we gave. So at the end of both webinars, we did want each of you to take the time to talk with your agencies and with your teams about, if you knew of culturally specific organizations in your communities. And if you didn't, to do a little bit of research to see what you found and what you learned about their services. So if there's anything that you found that you'd like to share, you can do so in the chat. And, we would be interested to just see if you were able to connect with and learn about any culturally specific agencies in your community or even nationally. In our second webinar, we asked, were you able to set a time to discuss what collaboration and partnership would look like? What key takeaways or next steps did you identify? And then if you had any initial thoughts or feedback on reading and reviewing the Collaborating for Justice guide. So if there's anything you'd like to share, feel free to drop that in the chat, because we are interested to know just kind of how, what that was like for you, and if what you learned from if you learned anything new in particular when you spoke with your team and took the time to research some other organizations. So just to do a little bit more of a brief recap, just want to make sure that we're all clear on what a culturally specific organization is. And so these organizations are designed by and led by the community that they intend to serve. And so with this initiative and with this webinar, the culturally specific programs are focusing on the African American community. And so in those, almost all of their clientele are from that particular community, and the services that are offered really reflect the cultural values, the norms, expectations, and attitudes, of the African American community. Also, the services reflect those things too. So these organizations also may provide a variety of programming that may not only focus on abuse or only focus on one topic or domestic violence, but may also address health equity, housing, mental health services, and several other issues. And while the African American community is not a monolith, and there is a tremendous amount of diversity, of course, within the African American community, diversity of experiences, perspectives, and also shared historical and cultural context, though. So it's important, again, to recognize historical and present day racialized oppression that occurs at the organizational, institutional, and structural level, that's really not adequately accounted for in traditional service provision approaches. So you see some elements of culturally specific programs which really do address and seek to create spaces for African American communities that address and that are responsive to historical and present day racialized oppression and traumas. And so, again, these organizations are rooted in that, and also rooted in these guiding principles as well. And so here, to recap our guiding principles from our from our Collaborating for Justice guide. These 8 principles were determined from the listening sessions, from the roundtable discussions and interviews that we had with culturally specific organizations and leaders. And so you see there are 8 of them listed. And first, understanding the impact of racism, building a holistic network, demonstrating trustworthiness, recognizing that relationships are everything, valuing the culturally specific programs expertise, sharing power and resources, investing in culturally specific programs, and promoting alternatives to law enforcement. So these were were 8 principles that really were apparent in our research, that are really could be guiding principles as a mainstream organization or agency in your work to work with culturally specific programs. And so here we have the Collaborating for Justice guide. You see there's a QR code there, so you can scan that to download that guide. I'll also put the guide, a link to it in our chat now, so that all of you can can access it if you need to. So this guide has 3 components. The first is the report, which is a discussion of the importance of culturally specific programs, the guiding principles, and the practice strategies. Secondly, there's the conversation guide, which provides guidelines for facilitating a conversation with your community. We know that before elder justice teams seek to build relationships with culturally specific programs, it's important to develop a common understanding of why this is important and how you're going to go about it. This guide in particular helps teams and mainstream organizations to lead a conversation on that. And so that is a bit more about component number 2. And component number 3 is our community forum toolkit. What we heard during I'll tell you a little bit more about this. What we heard during our listening sessions is that one of the barriers to collaboration is that often community partners work in silos. And so creating the space or hosting a community forum is an opportunity to address that. And this toolkit provides you sample agendas, a sample PowerPoint, talking points that you can have in your community to start to have conversations on this issue and on behalf of older African Americans, to develop a shared understanding about the needs of the African American older adult community and how best to partner to provide them with the care and the best care possible. So now moving to today, thanks for bearing with me for that recap. We are excited to host a conversation with culturally specific organization leaders, and we will hear directly from our 3 special guests on the following. We'll learn more about the history and purpose and programming of their organization, their partnership experience with mainstream organizations, the impact from their successful and unsuccessful collaborations, and what has helped to sustain their successful equitable collaborations. So lots of good stuff. So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Patricia Davenport, and she is the Executive Director of Our House Incorporated in Greenville, Mississippi. Dr. Davenport has 36 years of experience providing services to victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and dating violence. As the Executive Director of Our House, New Birth to Violence-Free Living, based in Greenville, Mississippi, is where she works and where she leads in the community. Her agency mission is to lead, empower, and inspire change by eliminating domestic violence and sexual violence through intervention, prevention, prosecution, victim protection, and sustainable restoration in rural communities, and also to enhance the lives of survivors of interpersonal violence by providing services that meet the psychological, spiritual, and cultural needs of those we serve. And also in 1993, she received an award from President Clinton for her work with victims. So welcome, Dr. Davenport. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. As you can see, I'm in the Holy Land there, so I really do enjoy just being out there. But let me just tell you a little bit about our organization and why we were created. Is that okay to go ahead and share a little bit about that?
But let's do this if we can. I'll introduce our other 2 speakers, and then
Okay,
we'll go right
we'll
into
come
that.
back. Okay.
But yeah, so thank you. So we will definitely get to it in just a moment. So next, I want to introduce Antonia Drew Norton. She is a director and founder of the ASHA Project, and her expertise spans for 3+ decades as a local and national advocate to influence policy change to urge culturally specific victim service delivery. She is a historian, an educator, and trainer on cultural competency with African American populations at the intersection of historical trauma, oppression, and incarceration. She serves as program developer and trainer. She also works to build collaborations, educates rising advocates, and continues to work directly with victims from the community, as well as those in Wisconsin prisons. So welcome, Miss Antonia Drew Norton, Mrs. Antonia Drew Norton. We're glad to have you. And finally, last but not least, is Kalima Johnson. She is the founder and executive director of the Sasha Center in Detroit, Michigan. She is a survivor of sexual assault and began her journey of helping those in need as early as she can remember. Her mission is to find ways and means for survivors to express themselves and heal from rape and sexual abuse. Ms. Johnson graduated from Wayne State University School of Social Work in 1997 with a master's degree specializing in mental health and community organizing. She has worked in the sexual assault and domestic violence field for over 15 years with the Michigan Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, the Detroit Police Department, and Serenity Services. This experience gave her direct insight into the lack of comprehensive, culturally specific services to self-identified survivors of sexual assault. And now, as you see, she is the founder and executive director of the Sasha Center. So welcome, Ms. Kalima Johnson. And then we have, just want to go over quickly. So our additional learning objectives after attending today, we really want you to be able, you should be able to emphasize the importance of equitable collaboration. You'll hear all about it. Again, describe the guiding principles and elements of equitable collaboration and partnership, explain real life examples of successful and unsuccessful collaborations, and then be able to specify the impact of these successful and unsuccessful ones. So let's make a transition to this new material. And so I will, as we begin our conversation, I'll stop screen sharing so that this is much more of a conversation, and you'll be able to see myself and the panelists. And then once if there are questions that you have, please utilize the Q&A. And then once we conclude our conversation, we will allow for participants, if you want to come off mute and ask your question, you can raise your hand, and you can also use the Q&A. I want to ask if you have specific questions to use the Q&A just so we can monitor those there, and maybe they don't get, and so they won't get lost in the chat, but both are available for you to use. All right. Now let us begin. So Dr. Davenport, you were so ready to share. So I'll come back to you to share with us your the history of your organization and why it was created.
Well, the history of my organization, I actually started working in Mainstream as a director of domestic violence and sexual assault shelter. And what I discovered during that time period was that multitudes of survivors with the same offender. And at that particular time, the agency that I was working with in Mainstream was not ready, to put it nicely, to go with a holistic approach. And in our particular county, it was over 72% Afro-American. And one of my approaches I wanted to go with was that in order to end the violence against women, because that was the focus at the time, was that you needed to deal with the batterers and the children, because you needed to break that generational cycle. And so that's one of the reasons why. And then also another reason was that there was no one working with survivors of homicide. During that time period, you would use 8 out of 11 of the victims of murder within our community were related to domestic violence. That really have not changed too much, because last year we had 27 murders, and of those 27, we had 17 related to domestic violence, clearly, including a police officer. So what we did, and the reason why we established our house, was not only to provide services that would break that behavior cycle, provide direct services for the victims, provide services for the children, but also provide education for the community at large. including the law enforcement, the schools, and the faith-based leaders. So those were our primary focus when we first started our house. As we expand and as we learn, we continue to develop. We continue to add on when necessary additional programming, because just like for this particular area here, it was really a default in our community that there was no one actually working with survivors of not survivor of homicide, survivors of elderly abuse other than one agency in our community, and they weren't dealing with the area of sexual abuse or domestic violence as it pertained to elderly abuse, because they did not see that as an issue. They did not see that as an issue of power and control until we developed a relationship and a partnership where we were able to come in and begin to train all of their social workers and counselors to help them understand the additional dynamics that they may have just excluded because they were so busy looking at medical abuse or financial abuse in that area. And also to look at some of the cultural experiences that they were denying our individuals who were in later life, as I like to say, part of them. And, you know, they couldn't understand the need why we want to have certain foods, why we want to have certain music. The assumption was that if you was over 55, you were supposed to sit in a chair somewhere and look at some TV. So we had to come in and let them know that we still alive and function after 55. We got a second wind during that time period. So it was part of our partnership was to try to educate how to incorporate our cultural experience within their overall mainstream agency. And we were primarily able to do that by relating to the workers who were actually of our same culture versus the mainstream administrators. So that's just a little bit about why we started and why we have a major concern in our community because of the lack of resources for the older community members. Did that answer your question?
Of course it did. It surely did. And then some. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, what an initiative. And you've been doing this work for a long time. So thank you so much for sharing that history with us. And so I now also want to turn to Mrs. Antonia Drew Norton with that same question, just to tell us a bit more about the history of your organization and why you were created. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I'm widely known throughout the field as Antonia Drew Van. So I still have people that aren't going to let go of that for whatever reason. So, but to just go right into the history of ASHA Project, and it was previously called ASHA Family Services, and it's actually a story of love. It was founded in 1987 in Milwaukee, and its purpose was to provide another option or place and space in the violence against women service provision, and do so within the community where African American women lived. We were non-conforming. How we formed, it was non-conforming. And ASHA continues as the only African-American culturally specific domestic abuse program in the city and state. And I've often said we are among the first in the country, so pretty much being out there for a long time. ASHA has been operating culturally responsive, trauma-informed victim services that are survivor life centered, with a focus on African American, Black victims, survivors. However, our client base tended to be 15 to 20% white women as well. So we have over 3 decades of experience working directly with survivors of gender-based violence, including domestic violence or intimate partner violence, which is our flagship, and primary services, along with sexual assault and human trafficking victims, both within the community and within prison system. And so our purpose also centered on developing a response that was often mitigated the systemic racialized oppression and barriers that survivors seeking services often saw within mainstream programming. So that's the purpose. And
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your work and for sharing that. Such a powerful story for us to learn and to know. And so thanks again. So I also, of course, want to ask Ms. Kalima Johnson to share more about the Sasha Center, its history, and its purpose. I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. And I want to say good afternoon to everyone. And I am so honored to be in the house with the 2 powerhouses that we have already on the panel. I remember when I first met Asha Services, or when I met the director, it was amazing to me and inspirational. And it was well before I had a chance to even begin to think about what Sasha Center would look like here in Detroit. We were founded 14 years ago. In June, it'll be 14 years. Sasha stands for Sexual Assault Services for Holistic Healing and Awareness. The reason why the program was developed is, as you heard in my bio, I actually was a clinician providing support and services and therapy to experiencers of sexual trauma in the Detroit area through the Detroit Police Department. That history is a little bit longer, and I won't take up too much time with that. But while I was working there, which was 8 years as an employee and 2 years as an intern, we were providing services to survivors who experienced rape. And here in Detroit, what they used to do is when a rape would occur, they would take them to one centralized hospital called Detroit Receiving. And that's where we were located. And we would carry this pager, and they would have us respond to these calls. And for those 8 years, 2 years as an intern, I thought the rape kits were going where they were supposed to be going, and that they were being investigated and things were happening as they should. Well, I left in 2005. And then by 2008 or 9, we found out that those rape kits actually were being stockpiled, not investigated, and in a building that was being torn down. And that devastated me. And at the same time, I was serving as a consultant to the Michigan Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. And I was going around the state talking with executive directors about how to make their programs more culturally relevant and specific and safe for Black women and girls. And while I was doing that, of course, I was met with a lot of vitriol, a lot of microaggressions, a lot of flat out racism. And one particular time I went out and I got home, and it was April, which is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And I was tired. It was at the end of the month. And I sat on the edge of my bed and I said, you should start your own agency for Black women because they need it desperately in this state. And then I said, went to bed. 4:30 a.m. in the morning, I heard wind. It said, it was wind. It really was a whisper, but it was clear. And it said, start your own agency and name it Sasha. And I got up and I wrote it on a paper, and then I looked it up on the internet to see if there was something like it. It was Asha in Milwaukee. And then I saw a Sasha Farm in Michigan. And then I was like, okay, that's it. We're going to call it the Sasha Center. And then I said, well, I guess it could be an acronym to actually make it even more distinctive. And I just shared with you what that acronym was. And we started the organization because, one, we knew that Black women had no visibility in mainstream programs or even within systems here in Detroit when they actually reached out finally for help regarding a sexual assault or trauma. And we are specifically just for sexual assault. We have never identified ourselves as a part of providing services to domestic violence experiencers, but we know for a fact that sexual assault occurs in all these contexts. And so we provide services to self-identified survivors of sexual assault in any context. If she's an African-American woman and she identifies that way, then she definitely can participate in our services. Our services are also very distinct. We provide support group services, and that's it. So we see ourselves as an auxiliary to other programs, both DV and SA. One of the things that we know for sure at the Sasha Center is that wherever Black women are and wherever Black women gather, there is sexual trauma. And because of that, we don't limit ourselves in terms of who we partner with. So we partner with everybody from hair salons to motorcycle clubs, just because we know that's where Black women are. And I'll say this lastly, and I'll be done. I think one of the main reasons why we created the Sasha Center is because here in Southeastern Michigan, no one was really asking Black women whose families migrated from the South, who families were enslaved, what they have been doing to heal from sexual trauma. And we wanted to ask Black women, what were you, or what have you been doing to heal from sexual trauma? And how can we bottle that? How can we formulate it? How can we make it a process by way of which we provide services? And it's a really interesting dynamic because in our groups, we don't separate people by age at all. So we do have older African-American women and men actually participating in our groups that we have. And some of our groups are non-gender conforming as well. But we do have older adults who participate. And there's so much I'd like to share about the things that we've learned and yet the things we still have to do to engage our older African-American population. But one of the things that we uplift at the Sasha Center is that our elders are our wisdom, and they have that, and we honor them in that way every time that they show up.
Oh, wow. Love that. And what the cause for you, or to hear about the rape kits that were not processed, that were about to be thrown away, and the way that you've been able to take that and now create this sacred space for these survivors is so remarkable. Thank you. And on that note, though, because our next question is about programming. So you started to touch on some of that programming. Tell us more about your programming at Sasha Center. What makes it unique? What makes it different from other agencies and what others may be doing?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that, because it's given me an opportunity to make up for something I'm probably sure was my fault, which is that you had a hold to a very old bio of mine. But it's still true. It was still true, but I'm taking all responsibility. I'm sure I was supposed to get it to you and didn't, and you were proactive. But I will say that I'm very interested in talking about our programming, because for twofold, there are two things that I'm doing currently right now that impact the way we provide services at the Sasha Center. One is that I am the lead consultant on relationship safety and management with the National Basketball Association. And it's my job to make sure that players have all the information, resources, and support that they need to have happy and whole, safe relationships. And that's from family and friends to their teammates, but specifically with their intimate partners. And so because of that, we have a lot of programming that we're doing to engage our men in community. And what we've come to learn is that we cannot even begin to address violence against Black women, particularly, until we create safe spaces for men to start talking. So that's one thing that we do at the Sasha Center that I'm super proud of. And then the other thing is that I am currently finishing up my classwork, getting ready to start preparing for my QEs. I'm actually working on my PhD in English literature at Wayne State University. And so a lot of our programs at Sasha Center involve looking at and identifying and uplifting Black feminist scholars, literary folk, writers, authors, and poets. I'm a poet, and I've been a poet and a writer for a very, very long time. And so we integrate those kind of experiences within our programs. So just to give you one example of a unique program that we have is that we have a writing poetry series that are for our self-identified sexual assault survivors. And we just started about 6 weeks ago. It runs for 8 weeks, and then we do it again in the fall. And we started out with looking at close read and analysis of Nikki Giovanni's work. And then we had 9 participants at that virtual session. And in that virtual session, 4 of the African American women in the room had never heard of Nikki Giovanni. Now, that is not their fault. We don't know, and there's no way to blame anybody about how they know or don't know anything about anyone in particular. But I believe, and we believe at the Sasha Center, that there is a disconnect between Black feminist scholarship, leadership, and research and the participants that we actually are serving. And that when they find out that they're Black women who have had excited utterances and advocacy and activism related to and rooted in helping Black women become safer sexually and otherwise, it gives them tools for actual healing. And so what happened also at the same time was that Nikki Giovanni was on her way to Detroit that following week. And so what we did was decided collectively to make it a hybrid session, and we met in person, and those 4 women who had never met Nikki Giovanni, never heard of her before, actually had a chance to meet with her, to speak with her, to ask questions. And that's really what makes us culturally relevant and specific, because we really center our experiences and we center the work that African American women have already been doing that's sitting right there for us to engage in for full integration of trauma.
Awesome. Wow. What an experience, and what amazing work that you are doing. Thank you so much. Mrs. Antonia, if you could share with us more about your programming and the programming at ASHA and what makes it unique.
I can go, I can talk about programming. I love what she does. I'm just stuck there.
I know.
What makes us unique from mainstream providers is we didn't operate from a white feminist model or framework, which does not address the divergent forms of oppression experienced by Black and other women of color who lack the privilege whiteness afforded them. And we focus on a person's life, not just the victimization, which is often the least of their priority. So oftentimes we have to go through the back door. If a woman comes to us for help, it's about housing, issues with her children, issues with getting food. So the back door is how violence may be addressed, but that's where you have to operate from where she prioritizes. We focus on the person's life, not just the victimization. ASHA's programming is a trauma-informed best practice model. What we did, and equally important, how we did it since inception, has been guided by those who were created to serve African American women survivors of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. Trauma-informed, culturally responsive practices were and continue to be intrinsic. ASHA's methods considered the need to provide an empathetic, compassionate, and caring non-clinical approach with victims that considered not only the impact of the individual violence experienced and the trauma history, but did so in the context of racialized systemic oppression. This is carried out from the environment created in the offices to how survivors are treated and greeted and made to feel safe and cared for, to respecting their choice and what they wanted to do, to our personnel who are reflective of them with lived experiences, to treating them in ways that focus on what happened to you versus what's wrong with you. Best practices continue to develop as more is learned about the impact of trauma in people's lives over the lifespan. And as a constant feature, we stay in tune to how we are serving and doing so in a culturally responsive and trauma-informed manner. ASHA offers an array of victim services, as earlier indicated, including advocacy, not just individual, but systems advocacy to change policy and practice. We do the elder care services, case management, individual and crisis counseling, and sister circle support groups. with ongoing features such as safety planning, lethality assessments, including military assessments for those with where there's a military tie between partners. ASHA offers anger management and parenting classes, as well as services for African American males in the Ujima Men's Program for harm doers and for those challenged with trauma histories as well. Our newest project that we have on board is our is temporary housing and rapid rehousing, and we currently have 12 fully furnished housing units. A summary.
That is wonderful. Wow. I mean, Asha has just been such a force in the Milwaukee community and the whole country, and how you've been a pioneer and a leader in this work. So thank you so much, Mrs. Norton. And so, Dr. Davenport, please share with us more about your programming. Tell us a little bit more about what makes it unique.
Well, after I get over being so humbled by these other two young ladies, I have to make an immediate disclosure. I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed with what's going on with other agencies, but I'm also in our agency. Sometimes I just feel overwhelmed because we're the only agency that's trying to meet the cultural need in the state. We're actually the only Pacific, like you were sharing, the only culturally Pacific agency for the state for domestic violence and sexual assault. Sometimes they like to say, okay, well, we have a Black director. Yeah, but tell me about your board of directors. Tell me about your clientele. Tell me about your leaders in your staff. What do they reflect? Do they even reflect your community or your target population? And I know that the other ladies have to deal with this too, but racism is just so well, let's just say so. And I'll give you an example. I was part of a statewide coalition for domestic violence. On there, we had asked and said, hey, can we have a subcommittee that deals with culturally Pacific individuals and survivors? And you know what they did was they voted for us to have it as long as there was a white person that was attending it, to be assured that what we were saying was not something that would be offensive to the whole, as they said, with the mainstream. Now, that to me was clearly an invite for me to leave that coalition. So in many ways, I had to make strong decisions. And we as culturally Pacific organization need to step up and say, because what you're doing is wrong. We had a state funding source who had provided for us over $600,000 in funding to work with our shelter program and our sexual assault program. And we had this funding for over 10, 15 years. It got transitioned to mainstream. And then what they decided was that our program in particular needed to follow the same guideline and structure as the other mainstream. So in regards to us providing cultural activities for our youth support group, us providing anything that was separate in that outline, we were not allowed to do that. We were penalized, and we had to literally go to court in regards to this. And my agency said, because we strongly believe in miracles, that we can do without. We can do without that source, because that source was not helping us. That source was penalizing us because we were addressing the culture that they really did not want to be fully addressed. So we do have a youth support group Let's Talk About It for our sexual assault youth. Then we have a Yes group, which is Youth Empowered to Serve. And we have another group that I'm so proud of, and many of my coworkers work with this group, called the Elite Ambassadors, age 13 to 24, and they serve as peer instructors. And so once a month, we meet with them and teach them about domestic violence and sexual assault so that they can go out and be mentorship to their own at that age. We go with them, of course, in case there's disclosure, but they go out, they do role playing, they do dances, they do poetry that they come up with and create. So I'm really, really proud of my group there. We worked with Dr. Francis Brisbane with our elderly program. And the first thing we did was create a conference. And it was so unique because we had over 40 different individuals who was 55 and above to help us outline the workshops and the topics. I never had so much fun in my life. They were talking about sex and the believer, and I was like, wait, where are we going here? They like, hey, and it was just so enlightening, and it was educational, like Johnson said, it was just educational to hear from that generation. So that was like the beginning of us hosting and sharing information in that area, and that just was powerful. So we do try to associate with like-minded individuals, and we do try to provide law enforcement training. And in order to get them to come, we also provide law enforcement continuing education hours. So we have been able to get that, which was a means of encouraging them to come in our other partnership. Of course, I mentioned at one time we had a domestic violence shelter for about 20 years. When COVID came, we had to literally regroup and readjust what we were doing with our agency in regards to the shelter and with our finances. So we developed a partnership with the local hotels. So now the hotels will house them, but we will pick them up to take them for their advocacy, their different direction, which is actually what we were doing at the shelter. Except for the in rural community, your shelter is hidden all about 10, 15 minutes because of law enforcement to tell everybody in town where it's at anyway. I'm still working on that confidentiality with my law enforcement team. And so we also have SARTS, which is the Sexual Assault Response Team. So we'll develop that, and we serve 6 counties. Before COVID, we were serving 19 counties. In the state of Mississippi, there are only 11 domestic violence shelters and 9 sexual assault programs, and there are 82 counties. So that pretty much tells you right there that we have extended ourselves many times. And in the heart of the Delta, where we're at, that's where the largest population of Afro-American resides. In the state of Mississippi, it's 33% Afro-American. And in our counties, the combined county is 72% Afro-Americans. So we, this is where I said that I have to be honest and say we're overwhelmed, because as each of the ladies was sharing, just like she was sharing, you know, you go through housing, you go through this, you know, sometimes the issue with that survivor may be that she needs her washing machine fixed. She just money just to pay to get that fixed, just to calm her spirit, to help her. And so we can't be everything for everybody, but our heart, we try our best to do the best that we can, because they're our sisters and they're our brothers, and they're our future generations as well as the generations that could be lost. And so for our agency, it's when you come into our agency, we hope that the first feeling that you get when you walk in our door, because of the way we have developed it, is a sense of home. And then after that, it will be a sense of belonging, because without shame, we got our portraits, our pictures, we got little statuette. We have no shame in displaying who we are, where we came from, and what our vision is for the future. And there was a time, I have to admit, I used to say, you know what, maybe I should have some mainstream pictures up here. And then it hit me when I walked into a mainstream organization, they didn't ask that question of themselves. Maybe I should have some Afro-American Black pictures up here. So I'm just loving being part of my culture. I'm loving being surrounded by it. I'm loving that I'm able to, because of my support system, to be comfortable in the midst of the heightened of racism in the Southern, where Ku Klux Klan still hosts parades. So that's enough about me. I got a website. You go on my website. That's enough. That's
Well,
enough.
thank
Got
you.
the
Thank you,
whole
Dr.
website.
Yes, yes, you do. And thank you, Dr. Davenport. You know, to hear from each of you how and what's so empowering is the intentionality to ensure that the spaces you are created are for and are affirming to Black people and of all ages, and also for older adults, and to do that unapologetically is so very important. So thank you for your programming that sure is not easy to create, but you have taken the time to learn and to know what is needed and work to meet that need. So that means so much. I want to shift for a bit, and you know, we've got several questions, and I'm also looking at the time. So I'm thinking about you know, moving to talk about partnerships. And you know, just want you to share, each of you to share more about partnerships that you've had with mainstream entities, be it elder justice teams or whatever, you know, whichever ones you have, and just tell us more about them. You know, what was good, what was, you know, what made it a success, or what was a challenge, so that our attendees can really hear and know more about what that's like, as they are interested in seeking and want to know, how do we build these equitable collaborations that will ultimately help African American older adults and all the African American community, and help us. So, you know, so please speak to that. Tell us more about your experience there and what is important for them to know.
Is that for anybody to jump in?
Yes, yes,
or?
it is. Sure, you can
Okay.
go right ahead.
All right. Only if Mrs. Norton doesn't mind. I'll just go in. SASHA stands for Sexual Assault Services for Holistic Healing and Awareness. I saw that in the chat, so I just wanted to address it. One of the things I want to say is I'd like to qualify the word mainstream, right? So some mainstream programs are DV and SA programs that are mainstream because they have the funding, they're the largest, they've been around the longest. And then I also want to identify mainstream as organizations that are also ran by African Americans that don't typically do sexual assault or domestic violence work. And then I also want to identify institutions, right, as a part of that mainstream, because again, at the SASHA Center, we see everybody as a potential partner in our work, because if Black women are there, Black folks are there, so is sexual trauma. So I'm lucky in that sense. Our largest mainstream sexual assault program here in Detroit, Michigan is Avalon Healing Center. It used to be called Wayne County Safe. Kim Hurst is the executive director, and we met each other when we were very young advocates trying to do this work. And I wouldn't say that she's a white feminist, but I think she has white feminist principles, but she definitely knows that I'm a Black feminist. And so we have actually met when she was advocating for the beginning of the program that she has now, which has streamlined our sexual assault nurse examiners program, streamlined our program all around providing sexual assault comprehensive services right here in the city of Detroit. And so our partnership started a very long time ago. When she got her first grant, she asked me to be the actual director of her advocacy program. But at the time, I could not, but I told her we would specifically continue to be intentional in working together, and we drew up an MOU. And so in that memorandum of understanding, we wrote out how we thought we would interact with each other. And we've been doing that for probably now prior to Sasha Center. So I would say going on 18 years. And that has benefited us in a lot of ways. And we'll get to that because I know that's a question. So the other thing I want to say, and it's gone well, and we've had our challenges, but we mostly have really played well together in the sandbox. And that's because she's an aspiring ally and she understands that there are certain ways that we have to show up. And I mean that by sometimes we might find ourselves at meetings for executive directors where I say something to the room and they don't understand it, and then she has to translate it, even though she's saying the same thing I've said. But that's just between, that's between us and trying to navigate space. But in terms of our programming, we cross-train each other's staff. We do cross events together. We actually participate in a lot of things. And the good news is she just acquired a huge, huge building. And in that space, she has given Sasha Center a huge part of it at no charge. And so, but that, like I said, that comes with some challenges. We're still trying to figure those things out and what it looks like. One of our other mainstream programs that we worked with was the Detroit Institute of Arts. I don't know if everybody knows, but the Detroit Institute of Arts for the second year in a row is the #1 museum in the country. And that museum is an institution that is ran by white folk and has always been ran by white folk. And we decided to reach out to them to do an art project as a collaboration between the Sasha Center and them. And we did that for a long time prior to the pandemic. One of the things that I want to say about that partnership that was good, there were challenges as well. We'll get to that. But one of the things that I would say was good about that was as a result of Sasha Center being in that space, taking up that space, using that space to engage in art and talk about African-American history and African history and art, we got a chance to really challenge that organization about not having any women of color docents, and now they have 6. So that's one of the ways that we partner, and those are things that I'm very extremely proud of. And I'll tell you more about programming that we have at the DIA, but then also programming that is specifically directed to our older population in the African American community. But that's one of the things that was so beautiful about our work with the DIA is we've had Black women in Detroit, Michigan that walked in that space, lived and raised. They were born and raised and live in Detroit, and said they had never stepped foot into the Detroit Institute of Arts because they didn't think it was their space. But for all of us to be together and lower that isolation of that experience is one of the main reasons why I think it's extremely important for us to continue to see mainstream in a very fluid way, and to make sure that we are in spaces that we are allowed to be in and that we are welcomed in and that we're safe in. And sometimes we have to carve that safe space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. Thank you so much. Definitely want you to hold and share with us in particular about the work with older adults. I heard you mention that and that piece as well as a part of partnership that you have. So please bookmark that one. I will shift to Mrs. Norton to please share a little bit more with us about your experience with partnerships and collaborations, and what has been successful, what hasn't. So feel free to touch on that now as well. You're on mute. You're on mute before you get started.
Okay. Absolutely. Partnerships and experience, they vary because, I'm the historian. So they have changed and they have evolved, and typically because of individuals. So you got to remember, ASHA was the first of its kind in Wisconsin and one of the first in the country. And so we were different. we were of and representative of the African American community. So for many years, being pretty much the only one, I was included in a number of discussions on multiple levels of city, state, and federal government. Our successes in some partnerships were due to individual relationships that were developed and had mutual respect. Milwaukee is widely known as a hyper-segregated city, and the Black community historically didn't have a good relationship with systems or services viewed as part of a system. As well, Asha didn't have good experiences with mainstream victim service providers who saw us more as a threat. And for all, the challenges primarily were due to race, class, and economics that had power and control dynamics. Asha from inception provided another option for survivors to access culturally responsive services. Not to mention, we were, again, non-conforming with differing values, beliefs, and practices as it related to African American populations whom we loved. Further, we didn't have elder justice teams specifically. However, we did have, for example, the Milwaukee Commission on Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, and elder service representation has been more involved in the CCR team participation, primarily due to individuals who wanted to learn more about others and cared about the well-being of the elder populations they serve. We have an exciting partnership that we've had for the past 2 years. We've currently have an amazing partnership with the School of Nursing at UWM. And one of our field placements that we have heard 20 hours a week for the past 2 years is a SANE nurse. She graduates in May, and we hope to receive a SANE grant to bring her on staff. In addition to her, we had 2 other nurses. So we were able to offer, I believe it was once a week, we were able to offer not only to women that were in our housing program, but to other sisters we were seeing throughout the programs, even in the men's program and those in the community, to have health screens. So we had 3 nurses on site that were providing these health screens for them and for people in the community. So that is kind of the partnership experience.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Davenport, please share with us a little bit more about your experience with partnerships and collaborations with mainstream organizations or entities. What have they been like for you?
Actually, what we do is work with a lot of mainstream national organizations. For example, we work with RAIN, which they assisted us in providing an online chat for our survivors of sexual assault. And with that, they trained my staff so that we would know how to go in, answer the questions, and monitor the questions. I think a lot of it has to do, like what Tony was saying, is individual relationships and developing them over time. We also have a project on healing that we did with the resource sharing project. And with that particular project, it's a 4-part e-learning. And we're able to bring all that to the rural community so that what we do here, and then we have a partnership with the Justice Department where they will come in and bring trainers for law enforcement, because as Ms. Johnson was saying, I could go in there and train them on Mississippi law, they won't hear me. But if someone from the Justice Department comes in that's from mainstream and teach them the same thing, they will hear it and believe it. So that's and then we try to partner with the universities that are mainstream so that we would get them and ask them if we could come in and assist, especially like during April in October. So we work with their public awareness groups so that maybe we could do the walk a mile, but we have changed that from walk a mile in her shoes to walk beside her doing her healing. And so coming up with other projects that will hit the mainstream, and in our community, it kind of makes us safe. I mean, it makes it safe for them to invite us, knowing that the projects that we're developing can be easily transformable for the mainstream. So, in another area that we work with in partnership is with the faith-based community in the hospital. The hospital, because of the in our area, there's only one SANE nurse. That's for 6 counties, only one trained SANE nurse. And with that, that's why our partnership with the emergency rooms are so important, so that we can get that initial contact and approval as an advocate to come in there and to provide assistance to our survivors. So that's one of the key partnership with the mainstream, especially with the hospitals. Oh, that's really key for us with the hospital and the medical.
Thank you. Wow, so many amazing partnerships, and so many different ways in which you all have done it, with many different disciplines. So I, next I know we had several questions, and I was thinking based off what you said, what would next be best? And what I'm thinking, I'd like you all to just talk about the impact of these partnerships that you've had. You've all talked about many different ones, but can you share more about, the impact that you've seen in your communities from them? And if there's one that wasn't successful, like what was the impact in that? Was anything compromised, that you can speak to that's important to know? So whoever wants to go next is fine.
I'm gonna go ahead and go and share.
Okay.
Since I just got through talking.
Yeah.
I would say one of the impact is that with these partnerships, it gave us a stamp of approval for individuals in the community to give us donations. That our agency was a well-rounded, founded organization. So that was a good stamp of approval for us, especially when the hospitals are funded through the Board of Supervisors. So to get their stamp of approval for our agency by them funding us, it gave out to the community as a whole that, hey, this agency is solid. They're financially solid. They program solid. They got a paper trail that we can appreciate. So that has been a good stamp of approval. One of the negative stamp of approval that I said that we got is because of the fact that we are tedious in our black and white and documentation. So we have had law enforcement to cuss us out because we have documented exactly what was happening. We literally had a sheriff there. There are some names that I didn't have a problem being, I had a problem being called. And so it was taped because we were dealing with his deputy who was an abuser of 2 different victims, and he didn't want to acknowledge it. So, but they knew that if our house was called in and we got a bad rep in the sense that law enforcement told their officers, do not at any time contact our house when there's a victim of domestic violence, because they were afraid of the documentation. I don't know if that answered your question, but I jumped in. Come on, y'all. Y'all give me my bag. Y'all do something. Help your sister out. Get some more examples.
You already know I got your back.
Yeah, I know this is out of order, but I have to say, this is one of our founding agencies that started, giving the support that was needed for our agency before we even developed. If she had not been in place with what she was doing on her national level, I know that the funding and the different programming would not exist without her and 5 other individuals that I know that has that track record. So I'm just proud and honored to be on a panel with you.
Ashe, Asheo, amen, and boom shakalaka.
Absolutely.
You know I love y'all. I love y'all.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is a wonderful time to give you your roses. We absolutely adore you, and we are so happy that you set the groundwork nationally, internationally for the work. So let's make room for her to speak now. Let her
Yes.
speak.
Yes.
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Okay. The partnerships is interesting. I love what Kalima was saying earlier about hitting all of these different pieces, and that's what we have to do, is make sure we intersect with anybody that intersects with us.
Yeah.
Where you see us, sometimes it's oftentimes an issue where we have to believe and feel as a culturally specific provider, it's not about me.
That's right.
I already know them folks don't like me, and they probably saying, hear her beady head self come again, but I'm going to be at every meeting, at every doorway. My dad used to say I used to tear up some cars running up the highway to be in people's faces, but that was something, again, it's about love. So, typically an individual in mainstream systems would reach out to us. They wanted to know about us and sincerely cared about the well-being of the population under their care. Or we reached out to them. Again, if you intersected with the folks I represent, I'm coming for you. I want to have a conversation. It ain't about us, it's about her.
Yeah.
So we'd reach out to them. And most oftentimes they were welcoming and wanted to learn about us and actively did that. Those were in the successful ones. They also opened doors in their systems and wanted to develop a relationship. Some recognized and understood that historical systems of racialized oppression caused significant mistrust of systems by some populations. For example, a regional chief with the Department of Corrections came to us to work with women under supervision who had histories of trauma, including domestic and sexual violence. That chief said to me that she heard me speak at several events in the community and began to learn about Asha's work. Subsequently, we began conducting victim support groups in prisons, and she allocated resources to contract with us to provide ongoing supportive services with survivors under Department of Corrections supervision. That chief also invited me to meetings at the state level to present to DOC personnel on ASHA services. So mutual trust and respect was developed. Subsequently, as new relationships grew, we gained access to any prison in the state to either work with men or women. Another example is an aide to a former governor that was also Tommy Thompson, who this former aide headed the Goodwill Industries, the welfare to work, one of the largest contracts. And he had his team find me. So he indicated that he'd heard me speak many times with the governor's office staff, with state staff, legislative hearings on ASHA's culturally responsive services, and heard the successes of survivors that we worked with. And he wanted to contract with us to provide an array of victim services for W-2 recipients in the central city of Milwaukee that included African-American women whose non-compliance challenges were causing them to get kicked off W-2, but he believed that they may be due to domestic and sexual violence victimization. One of the biggest that floored me was I was welcomed to a meeting with the former district attorney, E. Michael McCann. And he was very much aware of me and my work, which he represented and which he respected. And he valued us, what we did. I worked closely with people in his office who were referring victim cases to ASHA. I requested to meet with him because the DA's office saw a different population of victims than the restraining order office saw in the family courts. I had geared myself up in this meeting for a fight and a string of hoops to jump through, to ask for a sliver of space and time in his offices for my advocates to be able to work with victims seen in the DA's office. And he threw me for a loop. As soon as I got it out, he said, "Antonia, that's a good idea." And he began to take me through his offices to let me know to show me spaces that was available. And that was because of those individual relationships that are developed and built with these three systems I just told you about, tend to be seen as harmful to our community. But it's about those individual relationships building that where you can make headway in. It depends on who your focus is. Is it you or is it her?
You know, a couple of words that I'd like to uplift, and thank you so much for saying that, is capacity, acceptance, culture, respect, honor. I love that. And I want to bring up the word you've said since we started, which is love. And I want folks to think about, if you can find this article and drop it in the chat, by Darnell Moore, called Black Radical Love. And what he says is that our love, we can't afford to throw nobody away, and that we need each other in order to continue to do this work. So I just wanted to put that out there because I really am inspired by what you said, and I wanted to also add to that. But I want to say, I want to tell a story in terms of what just happened this past weekend, Saturday to be exact. All of our literally community involvement, engagements, and partnerships that we have came together in one space. At the Sasha Center, we believe that culture cures and that history heals. And so what we do is we engage unapologetically in our culture in ways that make sense to us. We allow survivors to express themselves in support groups in ways that only we understand because we've grown up in Black households. And so we allow survivors to tell their stories how they want to. Nikki Giovanni said it a few weeks ago. You know, I get it right most of the time, but when I can't, I make the rest of it up, and that's okay. And then I also want to say that part of why I want to share this story is it was really a representation of all of our partnerships coming together in one space. So this Culture Cures History Heals event we have every now and then, like 4 times a year. This year it's in October, of course, to acknowledge DV month, but then we do it in April to acknowledge Sexual Assault Month, where we actually invite our survivors to come into a space and enjoy and engage in love and joy. And so we had a hustle instructor from the West Side that we work with every now and then. Good guy, love to be around women. He's handsome and gave us all the looks and everything, but teaching us how to do the Tamia, which I still can't do. And we not just had hustle lessons, we had a chair massage person who was trauma informed. We had a coloring, we did puzzles, we played culture tags, we ate good. We had all these things going on. And I looked around the room and I saw women from Interim House, which is our 64-bed domestic violence shelter here in Detroit. I saw women from Payne Pulliam School, which is another partnership we have. I saw women who came from Wayne State University because they have a new sexual assault program, and they sent folks because we partner with them. And so I'm just looking around the room going, and we're in the space at Avalon, which is also our partner as well, who let us use the space for free. But looking in that space and holding space for joy, holding space for humor, irony, satire, and signification in all the ways that we express it, and being able to be one with the body and to ask very specific questions about how people engage in their culture and how they engage in their history for healing was quite magnificent. And at the Sasha Center, we don't find any strange partners. We figure it out. And in that room on Saturday, it was an amazing thing to see. We just posted some pictures of it. The ones of people who took pictures that did not mind, and they signed a release. And don't assume when you see pictures that people are participants. But we actually posted pictures on our Facebook page, and I think on our Instagram page, of that very event. And that is the benefit, I believe, of our partnerships, is that people come together, people lower their isolation, people recognize that they are not alone. And then it's that connection piece that we have around language and food and hair type and bodies and how we embody and love each other anyway. So that's part of what I always look for in partnerships with mainstream organizations. And it's that respect and it's that love that you talked about that really makes me think about it in that way. And I'm really appreciative to be in the space.
We are so appreciative that you are in this space as well. And you really brought us to, I can't believe our time is getting short. But you brought us to a question that I was thinking of combining some of the questions that I had sent you, and wanted to know if you can close out with a few words on what are some of the most important factors. And Khalima, I think you started to touch on them in your closing last few words there, but what are some of the most important factors and considerations that our attendees need to consider as they seek to engage with culturally specific programs and organizations? So if there's, a few words, just
Perfect
quick
question.
statements. Yeah.
Perfect question. I'll end with the poem by Lucille Clifton. Look her up if you don't know her. And the name of the poem is called "Won't You Celebrate With Me?" Won't you celebrate with me when I've turned into a kind of life I had no model? Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman. What did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay. My one hand holding tight, my other hand. Come and celebrate with me that something every day has tried to kill me and has failed.
All right.
Take that energy with you. Lucille Clifton, y'all.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Khalima.
You're welcome. Of course.
I can't go behind that.
Yes, you can.
I'm trying to get my words together to even see who wants to go next. My goodness, thank you. Wow.
And if I can just get out about equitable partnerships and, pushing for those pieces, because they're going to benefit all of us, and as a culturally specific provider across the board, we are primarily underfunded more so than others. An equitable partnership includes resource distribution that is fair, which is not always equal.
That's right.
Yep.
The Goodwill Industries partnership that I talked about, I mentioned earlier about, that was a significant contract that we had. And it was a larger contract for us that covered 5 full-time staff, including licensed clinicians. We were assigned 3 prominent offices and conference space in there at no cost. We have free will, meaning we designed our programming and scheduled our own times, and they did not dictate how we worked with clients. And client confidentiality was very much respected. We felt respected and valued. and we were invited to decision-making tables. And our voices were heard.
Mhm.
You know, when you talk about trust, respect, transparency, and honesty, those are some of the things that, you know, make a partnership successful. But also for providers, your budget is going to reflect what you value.
I know that's
And
right.
so I don't ever ask anybody to come do anything for us. I pay my folks, and I'm not asking you, even though I could ask them to come do something for me and I don't have the money to pay them, and I know they would come, but I don't do that.
Me either.
And what tends to happen, to kind of go back to what both of our experiences were with Dr. Davenport and with Khalima at the Sasha Center, is we are often asked to do things and compensated less than what they would compensate someone that don't look like me.
Mhm.
And so those are some of the things that, even when I think about it and talk about doing something, I'm focused on, okay, how much money I gotta have to get Khalima here? How much money I gotta have to get Dr. Davenport? That's where I'm thinking. And so anyway, those are just some practices and changes in thought that need to take place.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. And Dr. Davenport, can you close us out with the most important factors you want to share with our attendees?
We're in a farming area, rural. So I would just like to say the most important factor for me has always been to plant a seed and to watch it grow and to tend to it, so that when I'm working with Mainstream, I may know to make an individual contact, an email contact, a written contact, but I may also know that this ground is not ready for planting. And then I need to know to go to the next ground so I could plant the seeds so that we could continue to grow and feed our generation and to feed our victim. And we do that by just starting with the seed. A seed can blossom into all kinds of fruits. And so that's how I will close it.
Thank you. Thank you. And what I heard as a thread through each of these, and this word was mentioned, is just the importance and the power of relationships. You know, without the relationships and them being authentic, being trustworthy, being genuine, being sincere, is the foundation of being able to partner and to work together in collaboration to do great things and to make a significant change in and for our communities, and especially in the African American community for our older adults. So I cannot thank each of you enough. Thank you so much for all that you shared, for the work that you're doing, for the impact that you have made and that you're continuing to make over the many decades and dedication that you have given. What trailblazers, what amazing, innovative leaders you are. Thank you. Thank you so much. We are so grateful for your time today. You know, if there are, we got a couple minutes. If anyone has a burning question you want to add, I didn't see any in the Q&A. We've got several comments, lots of thank yous, lots of just great reflections also from what you shared. So also to all of our attendees, if you do have additional questions that come up, please feel free to reach out to me, Victoria Ferguson Young, and I will put my email in the chat, but I have been in contact with each of you. I'd be glad to get your questions to our attendees and to our panelists as well, if you have anything else that comes to mind. But thank you again. Thank you to everyone who has attended. Thank you also to our interpreters for the work that you are doing, for those who need the American Sign Language that are with us, but to our panelists and, you know, our special guests. Wow, thank you. Thank you for the many ways you have helped and continue to do so in the work. So thank you all for joining. I hope that we leave here, for all of you who have attended, leave ready to utilize all of we have shared over the course of these 3 webinars, to please read and review the resources, talk with your teams and your agencies. This session is being recorded. We will have the recording available in about a week. Share it with your colleagues who couldn't come, watch it again, talk about it. That's why it's here. And please utilize these things and take the courage, have courage and effort to really make the connections that are needed to ultimately make some positive change. So we are here to help and support you. And once again, we thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.